The red dust of Mars swirled around Brock Callahan's boots as he trudged along the perimeter road of New Horizon Colony. The faint hum of his delivery hoverbike competed with the ever-present whistle of wind through the prefabricated buildings. At 42, the former Earth Defense Force lieutenant's weathered face told a story of hard years, but his eyes remained sharp and observant, a habit from military days that civilian life hadn't erased. "Delivery for Henderson. Sector 4, he muttered to himself. Checking the package strapped to his bike, the settlement sprawled before him, a patchwork of interconnected habitation units, government facilities, and commercial sectors, humanity's fragile footprint on the red planet. New Horizon had been established 15 years ago, initially as a research station before expanding into the first permanent Martian colony. Now home to nearly 10,000 souls, it represented mankind's tenuous claim to a second world. Brock's thoughts wandered to his son Lucas, now 5 years old and likely pestering Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly neighbor who watched him during delivery runs. The boy had his mother's curious nature and Brock's stubborn determination, a combination that simultaneously filled him with pride and exhaustion. Maria had been gone 3 years now, taken by a pulmonary complication that the colony's medical facilities hadn't been equipped to handle. The memory of her still ached like a phantom limb, present in its absence. She'd been a botanist, part of the agricultural team, with dreams of transforming Martian soil into viable farmland. Lucas had her eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber that caught the light just so. The package bounced against Brock's leg as he navigated a particularly rutted section of wood. Life on Mars demanded versatility, and after his military contract ended, he'd cobbled together a living from delivery services, mechanical repairs, and whatever odd jobs came his way. His reputation as a skilled mechanic kept food on the table, though barely. The military pension helped, but inflation on Mars outpaced Earth rates 3-to-1. Their home was a standard-issue prefabricated unit on the colony's outskirts. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen living area, and a small workshop he'd added using salvaged materials. Paint peeled from the exterior walls, weathered by countless dust storms. The interior wasn't much better. Patched furniture, mismatched dishes, and toys scattered across worn flooring. But it was theirs, and he defended it against foreclosure notices more than once. As Brock rounded the bend toward Henderson's place, something unusual caught his eye. Off the main road, partially obscured by a rocky outcropping, sat what appeared to be a vehicle. But unlike any he'd seen before, it wasn't colonial design, nor Earth military. The sleek, silvery craft had no visible propulsion system, yet it hovered about a foot off the ground, its underside emitting a faint blue luminescence. "What the hell?" he muttered, slowing his hoverbike. Caution told him to keep moving, make his delivery, and report the anomaly to colony security. Curiosity, and the mechanic in him, pulled him toward the strange craft. He parked his bike and approached slowly, one hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm he no longer carried. As he drew closer, he noticed something moving on the far side of the craft, a figure hunched over what appeared to be an open-access panel. Brock stopped, assessing. The figure stood about 4 feet tall, with a slender build and 4 arms working methodically at the exposed inner workings of the craft. Its skin was a pale bluish gray, and what Brock had initially taken for clothing seemed to be part of its body, a seamless exoskeleton in darker blue with intricate patterns etched across its surface. An alien. A real, honest-to-God alien. Brock had heard rumors. Of course. Everyone had. Whispers of government contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, classified military encounters, secret treaties. But official channels maintained there had been no confirmed contact. Yet here one stood, cursing in what sounded like bubbling liquid running backward through a synthesizer. The alien hadn't noticed him yet, focused entirely on its repair work. From what Brock could see, it was struggling with what appeared to be a power coupling or drive mechanism. His eyes narrowed as he studied the exposed components. Despite their alien design, he recognized the fundamental principles at work: energy transfer, flow regulators, stabilization arrays, different technologies, same problems. "You've got your flux capacitor in backward," Brock said before he could stop himself. The alien spun around, all four arms raising various tools in defensive positions. Its face, if you could call it that, consisted of three silvery eyes arranged in a triangle above what might be a breathing apparatus. No visible mouth. Yet somehow the startled screech it emitted was unmistakably one of surprise and alarm. Brock raised his hands. "Whoa, easy there. Just making an observation." The alien chittered rapidly, the sound modulating through what must be some kind of translation device strapped to its midsection. After a moment, it spoke in heavily accented but understandable English. "Human intervention not required. Depart immediately." "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble," Brock said, keeping his hands visible. "I'm just a mechanic, and from what I can see, you've got your primary energy transfer coupling reversed. That's why your stabilizers are fluctuating." The alien's three eyes blinked in unison, then independently, creating an unsettling ripple effect. It tilted its head, regarding Brock with what seemed like suspicion. "Human possesses technical knowledge of M-class propulsion systems?" Brock shrugged. "I don't know what an M-class propulsion system is, but I know when something's hooked up wrong. 20 years fixing everything from coffee makers to orbital shuttles gives you an eye for these things." The alien hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing toward the open panel with one of its lower arms, while the upper one still gripped tools defensively. "Observe. Explain flaw." Brock approached cautiously, conscious of the alien's watchful gaze and the complete absurdity of the situation. The component he'd spotted was indeed similar to energy couplings he'd worked with before, though far more advanced. The crystalline structure that he assumed functioned as a power core was seated incorrectly, causing misalignment throughout the system. "See here?" He pointed without touching. "This crystal matrix is rotated 90 degrees from optimal position. The energy flow is hitting resistance instead of following the natural channels in the crystal structure. And this regulator here," he pointed to another component, "is trying to compensate by rerouting power, but it's overloading your secondary systems." The alien made a sound like water draining from a sink, its eyes widening and contracting in sequence. Human mechanical intuition. Unexpected. It hesitated, then extended a tool toward Brock. "Correction permitted." Brock blinked in surprise. "You want me to fix it?" "Affirmative. Time constraints significant." For a moment, Brock considered the implications. Interacting with an alien craft could violate a dozen colonial regulations, not to mention potential Earth treaties he wasn't even aware of. But the mechanic in him couldn't resist the challenge, and something about the alien's predicament struck a familiar chord. He'd been stranded with a broken-down vehicle too many times not to sympathize. "All right," he said, accepting the tool, which resembled a cross between a wrench and a laser pointer. "But I need to make a call first. My son's waiting for me." The alien's translation device emitted a series of clicks before responding. "Offspring. Understood. Communication permitted." Brock stepped back and called Mrs. Abernathy, explaining he'd be delayed by an unusual repair job. When he mentioned bringing Lucas to see it, she sounded relieved to be freed from babysitting duty sooner than expected. The old woman had a fondness for Lucas, but limited patience for a 5-year-old's energy. 20 minutes later, Brock was elbow-deep in alien technology, with Lucas perched on a nearby rock, eyes wide with wonder. Mrs. Abernathy had dropped him off with a warning not to stay out after dark. Dust storms were predicted for the evening. "Is he really from space?" "Dad?" Lucas whispered loudly, swinging his legs and clutching his favorite toy, a stuffed Earth dog he'd named Commander. "Seems that way." "Buddy," Brock replied, carefully realigning the crystal matrix. The alien watched intently, occasionally offering a tool or chittering what Brock assumed were instructions. "But let's keep this between us for now, okay? It'll be our secret adventure." Lucas nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin as the alien approached him, extending what appeared to be a small, glowing orb. The boy hesitated, looking to his father for permission. "It's okay," the alien said, its translation device rendering the words in a softer tone than before. "Educational construct. Harmless." Brock nodded, and Lucas accepted the gift, gasping as the orb expanded slightly in his palm, projecting tiny holographic stars and planets that rotated slowly above his hand. "A galaxy," Lucas exclaimed, transfixed. "Affirmative. Home system." The alien pointed to one of the stars with a slender appendage. "Origin point." As Brock worked, he found himself explaining each step of the repair process, partly to Lucas as an impromptu lesson, partly to the alien to ensure he wasn't making critical errors with the unfamiliar technology. Despite the language barrier and technological differences, the fundamentals of mechanical repair transcended species. A problem identified, components examined, solutions implemented, systems tested. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the Martian landscape. When Brock finally closed the access panel, the craft hummed with renewed energy, its blue underlight steadier and brighter than before. "That should do it," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I reseated the crystal, rebalanced the flow regulators, and bypassed that damaged circuit. It's not a permanent fix for the damaged section, but it'll get you where you're going." The alien performed what looked like a systems check, manipulating controls inside the craft through a side hatch. After a moment, it emerged and approached Brock. Functionality restored to 92.4% capacity, sufficient for journey completion. It paused, head tilting. "Compensation required." Brock waved a hand dismissively. "No charge. Just helping out a traveler in need." The alien's eyes blinked in rapid succession. Unusual response. Most species require exchange. "Dad fixes things for people all the time." Lucas piped up, still entranced by the holographic galaxy in his palm. "He says it's the right thing to do." "The kid's right," Brock said with a smile. "Besides, how often do I get to work on alien technology? Consider it a learning experience." Before the alien could respond, the sound of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. Brock turned to see Dalton's weathered jeep bouncing along the access road. Dalton was the colony's self-appointed busybody, an administrator with security clearance who never let anyone forget it. "Trouble," Brock muttered. "You should probably get going." The alien seemed to understand the urgency. With surprising speed, it retrieved the orb from Lucas, who reluctantly relinquished it, sealed the craft, and prepared for departure. "Gratitude expressed, Brock Callahan," it said, using his name for the first time, though he hadn't provided it. Actions recorded. Before Brock could question this, the alien had entered its craft. The vessel hummed louder, lifting higher off the ground, then shot skyward with barely a sound, accelerating at a rate that would have crushed any human pilot. Within seconds, it was nothing more than a distant glint against the darkening Martian sky. "Well, I'll be damned," Brock whispered, one arm around Lucas's shoulders. "Callahan," Dalton's voice carried across the rocks as his jeep screeched to a halt. The balding man in his pressed colonial administration uniform approached with his typical swagger. "What are you doing out here? And what was that light?" "Just watching the sunset with my boy," Brock replied evenly. "Mars puts on quite a show this time of year." Dalton's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "There was a report of unusual activity in this sector. Unidentified craft." "Really?" Brock feigned surprise. "Haven't seen anything like that. Just doing a bit of father-son bonding before the dust storm hits." Dalton looked unconvinced, his gaze shifting between Brock, Lucas, and the empty space where the alien craft had been. You know, Callahan, your military record buys you some leeway around here, but there are protocols for a reason. If you saw something, I'd report it. Sure, Brock interrupted. Like any good citizen. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to get Lucas home for dinner. Dalton hesitated, then nodded curtly. See that you do. Dust advisory, just upgraded to a warning. Full storm by 2100 hours. He returned to his jeep, casting one last suspicious glance before driving away. He doesn't like us very much, Lucas observed as they walked back to Brock's hoverbike. Dalton doesn't like anybody much, Brock replied, helping his son onto the bike and securing his helmet. He especially doesn't like ex-military who don't jump when he says jump. As they rode home through the gathering dusk, Lucas peppered him with questions about their alien encounter. Brock answered as best he could, emphasizing again the importance of keeping it secret. By the time they reached their prefab house, the wind had picked up considerably, carrying the first whispers of the coming storm. That night, after tucking Lucas into bed with promises of pancakes for breakfast, Brock sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The events of the day replayed in his mind. He'd touched alien technology, spoken with a being from another world, and sent it on its way without so much as filing a report. Part of him wondered if he should have handled things differently. But another part, the part that had grown weary of bureaucracy and regulations that rarely benefited people like him, felt oddly satisfied. He finally went to bed as the dust storm reached its peak, rattling the shutters and filling the air with the sound of a million tiny impacts against the prefab walls. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of crystal matrices and stars arranged in unfamiliar patterns. Morning arrived with the eerie stillness that followed a major dust storm. Brock awoke to Lucas bouncing on his bed, chattering about promised pancakes and whether they might see their space friend again. Groggily, Brock pulled himself up, ruffled his son's hair, and shuffled toward the kitchen to start breakfast. He was halfway through mixing batter when Lucas, who had gone to look out the front window, came running back with wide eyes. Dad, there are big black ships outside our house. Brock frowned, setting down the mixing bowl. What are you talking about, buddy? Come see, they're huge and shiny black, and they're just floating there. With a growing sense of unease, Brock moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. 3 massive vessels, sleek and obsidian, hovered silently above the ground surrounding their modest home. Each was easily the size of a small colonial transport, but their design was like nothing produced by human hands. Organic curves melding seamlessly with geometric precision, surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They bore no markings, no visible propulsion systems, yet they maintained perfect position despite the residual winds from the night's storm. Are those alien ships? Dad, Lucas whispered, clutching Brock's leg. Before Brock could answer, a sharp series of knocks rattled their front door. He exchanged a look with Lucas, then guided the boy behind him. Stay here, he instructed quietly, moving toward the door with the caution of his military days. Through the peephole, he could see a delegation of figures, some human, others decidedly not. With a deep breath, Brock opened the door. The group standing on his dusty front porch represented the most surreal gathering he'd ever witnessed. At the forefront stood a tall, imposing figure in what appeared to be a formal military uniform of Earth Defense Force design, but with insignia Brock didn't recognize. Behind him stood 2 colonial administrators, including a wide-eyed Dalton whose usual smugness had been replaced by barely concealed awe. And flanking them were 4 non-human entities, 2 resembling the alien from yesterday, though in more elaborate attire, and 2 others of entirely different physiologies that Brock's mind struggled to process. Lieutenant Brock Callahan? The military figure asked, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. Former Lieutenant, Brock corrected automatically. Just Brock now. The man nodded. I'm Commander Whitaker, Earth Defense Force, Special Diplomatic Division. May we come in? We have matters of significant importance to discuss. Brock hesitated, acutely aware of Lucas peering around his leg and the curious neighbors now emerging from their homes to gawk at the extraordinary scene. This isn't exactly a reception hall, he said, gesturing to his modest dwelling. And I was just making breakfast for my son. One of the aliens, similar to yesterday's visitor but with more elaborate markings on its exoskeleton, stepped forward. When it spoke, the translation was smoother, more natural than the device from yesterday. The nourishment ritual may proceed. Our discussion will benefit from informal surroundings. Brock stared for a moment, then shrugged. All right then. Come in. But fair warning, the place is a mess, and I only have 4 chairs. He stepped aside, allowing the strange delegation to enter his home. Commander Whitaker and one of each alien type followed him in, while the others remained outside, presumably to secure the perimeter or simply wait in the impressive vessels. Lucas, initially shy, quickly overcame his reticence when one of the aliens, a being with features reminiscent of Earth's extinct cephalopods, produced a small device that projected colorful patterns in the air. Within minutes, the boy was engaged in what appeared to be a simple pattern-matching game with the creature, their communication transcending language barriers. In the kitchen, Brock somewhat dazedly continued making pancakes, the mundane task a surreal counterpoint to the extraordinary circumstances. Commander Whitaker sat at the small table, while the 2 aliens observed the cooking process with what seemed like scientific interest. I assume this is about yesterday, Brock said finally, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. Indeed, Whitaker confirmed, though perhaps not in the way you might expect. The alien with the familiar physiology stepped forward. I am Ambassador Zenthral, representing the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps. The being you assisted yesterday was Scout Observer Crix, conducting a standard planetary assessment. Brock transferred pancakes to a plate, called Lucas to get his breakfast, then turned to face his unusual guests. Planetary assessment, for what purpose? Your solar system resides on the boundary of 3 major interstellar territories. Zenthral explained. As human exploration expands, contact protocols must be established. Scout Observer Crix was evaluating human response patterns to unexpected extraterrestrial presence. You were testing us? Brock frowned, crossing his arms. Not exactly, Commander Whitaker interjected. The Galactic Council has been monitoring Earth and its colonies for decades, gradually preparing for formal contact. Yesterday was meant to be a controlled encounter in a low-population area. The craft malfunction was not simulated, Zenthral added. Scout Observer Crix experienced genuine technical difficulties. And I was just in the right place at the wrong time, Brock concluded. Or perhaps the right place at the right time. The other alien spoke for the first time, its voice resonating with harmonic undertones that made Brock's coffee mug vibrate slightly. I am Liaison Thraxa. Your response to Crix's situation was illuminating. Brock leaned against the counter, suddenly very aware of the absurdity of discussing interstellar diplomacy in his tiny, run-down kitchen while his son ate pancakes and played with an alien in the next room. How so? Most sentient beings, when encountering unknown technology and life forms, exhibit one of 3 responses. Zenthral explained. Aggression, fear-based avoidance, or opportunistic exploitation. You demonstrated a 4th, rarer response. Collaborative assistance without expectation of compensation. It was just a broken ship, Brock said with a shrug. Didn't seem right to leave anyone stranded, human or otherwise. Commander Whitaker leaned forward. Mr. Callahan, what you may not realize is that your interaction with Crix was observed and recorded in its entirety. The Galactic Council has reviewed this interaction and found it promising. Promising for what? The Galactic Council is establishing an interspecies technical court, Zenthral said. A collaborative initiative to address infrastructure challenges across member systems. Your particular combination of technical aptitude and ethical framework is precisely what this program requires. Brock blinked, processing the implications. Are you offering me a job? We are offering you an opportunity, Thraxa corrected, to represent humanity in a pioneering interstellar collaboration. Your mechanical intuition crosses species boundaries, a rare and valuable trait. Brock laughed, the sound tinged with disbelief. I'm a washed-up ex-military mechanic living in a rundown prefab on the edge of a Martian colony. I barely make ends meet fixing hoverbikes and climate systems, and you want me to, what, become some kind of interstellar repairman? Your self-assessment is inaccurate. Zenthral stated. Our evaluation indicates exceptional problem-solving capabilities, adaptable technical comprehension, and most importantly, a moral framework compatible with Council principles. Commander Whitaker nodded. The Defense Force has reviewed your service record as well. Callahan, your innovations during the Europa conflict saved lives on both sides. That kind of thinking is exactly what's needed. Brock shook his head, gesturing around the modest kitchen. I have responsibilities here, a son to raise. I can't just leave everything behind for some interstellar adventure. The program includes family accommodation, Thraxa said, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Your offspring would receive education among diverse species, an unprecedented opportunity. From the living room came the sound of Lucas's laughter, punctuated by the musical tones of his alien playmate. Brock glanced in that direction, thoughts racing. Lucas had never quite fit in at the colony school, too curious, too energetic, too haunted by his mother's absence, since Maria's death. Brock had done his best, but resources were limited, both financially and emotionally. What exactly would this entail? He asked finally. Ambassador Zenthral produced a small, glowing data chip from a compartment in its exoskeleton. Initial training would occur at the orbital facility above your Earth. 6 standard months of technical orientation and cultural integration. Following successful completion, you would be assigned to a maintenance vessel serving the outer reaches of your solar system, with graduated expansion to neighboring systems. The pay and benefits are substantial, Whitaker added. Full education for your son, comprehensive health care beyond what's available in the colonies, and housing appropriate to human needs. Brock accepted the data chip, turning it over in his hands. The surface shimmered with information that seemed to shift as he examined it. His mind was already calculating mortgage payments on a house they could barely afford, Lucas's future education costs, the medical care that might have saved Maria if they'd had access to better facilities. And if I say no, then we depart. Zenthral stated simply. Your memory remains intact, but formal disclosure of this encounter would be classified under Earth's existing protocols. Your life continues unchanged. Except I'd know, Brock murmured, about all of this. He gestured vaguely upward, encompassing the vastness beyond Mars's dusty atmosphere. Knowledge without action is a burden some find heavy, Thraxa observed. Brock was silent for a long moment, the data chip cool against his palm. From the living room, Lucas called out, Dad, Vexry can make shapes with his whole body. Come see. Give me a minute to think, Brock said, setting the chip on the counter and moving to the living room doorway. Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, watching in delight as the cephalopod-like alien contorted its limbs into geometric patterns. The boy's face was alight with wonder, free from the shadows that had haunted him since Maria's death. It was an expression Brock hadn't seen in far too long. Dad, can they stay for more pancakes? Lucas asked when he noticed his father. Brock smiled despite himself. I think our guests have more important things to do. Buddy. Actually, the alien called Vexri said, its translated voice melodic, I find your cooking ritual fascinating. The chemical transformations and cultural significance of shared nourishment transcend species boundaries. He means he wants pancakes. Dad, Lucas interpreted with the confidence of a child. Brock laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even him. Well, I've never made breakfast for an alien before, but there's a first time for everything. He turned back to the kitchen, where Zenthral, Thraxa, and Commander Whitaker waited expectantly. As he mixed more batter, Brock found himself imagining a future he'd never considered possible, one where Lucas grew up among the stars, learning from species across the galaxy. His horizons infinitely broader than the dusty confines of a struggling Martian colony. A future where Brock's skills found purpose beyond scraping together enough credits for next month's life support fees. If we did this, he said finally, flipping a fresh batch of pancakes, I'd need guarantees. Lucas's well-being comes first, and I'd want to understand exactly what I'm getting into before making any commitments. Reasonable conditions, Zenthral acknowledged. The data chip contains comprehensive information regarding the program, including specific provisions for dependent care, and I'll be your liaison throughout the process, Whitaker added. Earth is establishing formal diplomatic relations with the Council, but it's all very new. Having humans like you involved from the ground up will help shape how these relationships develop. Brock served the fresh pancakes, watching in fascination as Vexri delicately manipulated the food with appendages that seemed to shift form as needed. When would we need to leave? He asked. Orientation begins in 7 Earth days, Thraxa replied. Sufficient time to conclude your affairs here. 7 days. A week to decide whether to abandon everything familiar for a leap into the utterly unknown. A week to pack up their meager belongings, say goodbye to Mrs. Abernathy and the few other neighbors who'd been kind, and prepare Lucas for a journey beyond anything humans had experienced before. Yet as he watched his son interacting with beings from across the stars, Brock felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained him through Maria's illness and death, nor the grim determination that had kept them afloat since. This was something brighter, more expansive, like standing at the threshold of a door suddenly flung open to reveal vistas previously unimagined. I'll need to sleep on it, he said finally, though in his heart, the decision was already forming. Commander Whitaker nodded. Of course. We'll return tomorrow for your answer. The remainder of the day passed in a blur. After the delegation departed, their massive vessels rising silently into the Martian sky, drawing every neighbor outside to stare in astonishment, Brock and Lucas were left in a house that suddenly seemed smaller and shabbier than ever. Are we going to go with them, Dad? Lucas asked as they washed dishes together, a nightly ritual that usually involved more water on the floor than in the sink. Brock considered how to answer. Would you want to? It would mean leaving Mars, maybe Earth too, going very far away. Lucas thought for a moment, his small face serious. Would Mom be able to find us, if she's watching from heaven? The question caught Brock off guard, a familiar ache blooming in his chest. Your mom would find you anywhere in the universe, buddy. She'd just follow the sound of your laugh. Lucas nodded, satisfied. Then I want to go. Vexri said there are planets with oceans so clear you can see all the way to the bottom, even when they're super deep, and flying cities, and animals with 6 legs that can change colors. Did he now? Brock smiled, handing his son a plate to dry. He said I could learn to be a, xenobiologist? Someone who studies all the different aliens. Mom would like that, wouldn't she? She studied plants, and I could study aliens. She'd love that. Brock agreed softly. Maria had always encouraged Lucas's curiosity, crafting elaborate bedtime stories about what might exist among the stars. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Brock examined the data chip more carefully. Inserting it into his battered tablet revealed detailed information about the interspecies technical core, its mission, structure, and the specific role he was being offered. The images and text shifted and adapted as he explored, seeming to anticipate his questions before he fully formed them. The salary figure made him choke on his coffee. More than 5 years of his current income combined. Housing would be provided in human-compatible sections of council facilities, with environments specifically designed for optimal physical and psychological well-being. Lucas would attend an educational program alongside offspring of various species, with curriculum adapted to capitalize on his human learning patterns while exposing him to diverse knowledge systems. Most compelling were the sections on technical training. The council possessed engineering principles centuries beyond Earth's current understanding. Brock would have access to technologies he could barely comprehend, with the opportunity to apply his intuitive problem-solving approach to challenges across multiple species and environments. As the night deepened, Brock found himself sitting in Lucas's doorway, watching his son sleep. The boy clutched Commander, his stuffed dog, while starlight from the small window cast patterns across his peaceful face. Mars had never felt like home. Not really. It was where they had ended up after Maria's death, when Earth held too many painful memories and the colonies offered slightly better opportunities for someone with Brock's skill set. But home, Brock was beginning to realize, wasn't about location. It was about purpose, belonging, opportunity. If this strange turn of events could provide those things for Lucas, how could he possibly refuse? Morning came with a sense of clarity. When Lucas woke, Brock was already in the kitchen, making a special breakfast and compiling a list of what they'd need to pack. "We're going, aren't we?" Lucas asked, still rubbing sleep from his eyes but instantly alert to the change in his father's demeanor. "If you're sure it's what you want," Brock replied. "It won't be easy. We'll be the newcomers, the different ones. But I think it could be good for us. A fresh start." Lucas's answering smile was all the confirmation he needed. The delegation returned precisely 24 hours after their first visit, this time with only one vessel, smaller but no less impressive. Commander Whitaker accompanied Ambassador Zenthral to the door while curious neighbors pretended to go about their daily tasks, stealing glances at the otherworldly scene. "You've reached a decision?" Whitaker asked when Brock invited them in. "We have," Brock confirmed, one hand on Lucas's shoulder. "We accept your offer, with the conditions we discussed yesterday." Zenthral's 3 eyes performed their blinking sequence, which Brock now recognized as an expression of approval. "Excellent. Preparations for your transition will commence immediately." The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Brock's modest home and possessions were easy enough to liquidate, a benefit of owning so little. Colonial officials, upon learning of his special assignment, the official cover story involved advanced technical training on Earth, expedited the necessary paperwork with uncharacteristic efficiency. Dalton, surprisingly, was among the most helpful, perhaps hoping to secure his own connection to whatever mysterious opportunity had come Brock's way. Lucas said goodbye to his few friends with the resilience of childhood, more excited about the adventure ahead than saddened by what he was leaving behind. "Mrs. Abernathy cried a little, pressing a handmade blanket into Lucas's arms and extracting a promise from Brock to send word when you can, wherever you end up. 7 days after the black vessels first appeared above their home, Brock and Lucas stood in their empty living room, small duffel bags containing their essential belongings at their feet. A specially equipped shuttle would take them first to Earth, then to the orbital facility where their training would begin. "Ready for our big adventure, buddy?" Brock asked, tousling his son's hair. Lucas nodded, clutching Commander in one hand and his mother's photo in the other, the 2 possessions he refused to pack away. "Do you think the stars look different from space?" "I imagine they do," Brock replied. "Brighter, probably, without atmosphere in the way. Mom would like that, Lucas said confidently. She always said Mars dust made the stars look fuzzy. Brock swallowed past the lump in his throat. She did say that, didn't she? A soft chime announced the arrival of their transport, with one last look around the place that had been their home for the past 3 years. Brock took his son's hand and stepped outside to meet their future. The orbital training facility exceeded anything Brock could have imagined. Positioned in Earth's orbit, the massive structure resembled a wheel with 8 spokes extending from a central hub. Each spoke housed facilities for different species, environmentally controlled to meet diverse biological needs. The outer ring rotated to provide gravity, while the central hub maintained zero-G conditions for species that preferred such environments. Their first weeks were devoted to acclimatization, medical evaluations, cultural orientation, and preliminary technical assessments. Lucas adapted with the remarkable flexibility of childhood, quickly making friends among the surprisingly numerous offspring of various council representatives and technical staff. The educational program engaged his curious mind in ways his previous schooling never had, incorporating physical movement, practical application, and multi-sensory learning. For Brock, the transition proved more challenging. The technical training was rigorous, requiring him to unlearn certain Earth-centric principles while expanding his understanding of universal engineering concepts. The diverse teaching methodologies, some telepathic, others holographic or experiential, sometimes left him mentally exhausted and questioning his ability to succeed. "You're experiencing normal adaptation stress." His primary instructor, a matronly being named Janarara, whose species resembled upright, feathered serpents, assured him after a particularly difficult session. "Your neural pathways are literally reconstructing to accommodate new conceptual frameworks. On Earth, we just call that a headache," Brock muttered, rubbing his temples. Janarara made a sound that might have been laughter. "Perhaps. But consider, your son has acquired basic communication skills in 3 non-human languages in the time you've struggled to master one technical protocol. Younger neural networks adapt more readily." It was true. Lucas was thriving, returning to their quarters, each day bubbling with new discoveries and proudly demonstrating his growing ability to mimic alien communication methods. He'd formed a particular bond with a young Tellurian named Miri, whose parent was an environmental systems specialist. The 2 children could often be found in the botanical gardens, comparing notes on the diverse plant life gathered from across the galaxy. "Dad, Miri says her mom knew Mom," Lucas announced one evening, bursting into their quarters with characteristic enthusiasm. "She worked with the Earth Botanical Exchange Program before I was born." The connection provided an unexpected comfort, a thread linking their new life to the one they'd left behind. Miri's parent, Dr. Solara, had indeed collaborated with Maria on early Martian terraforming projects, and possessed fond memories of the brilliant, passionate botanist who had envisioned forests on the Red Planet. "She had vision beyond most humans," Solara told Brock during a shared meal in the communal dining facility. The Tellurian's luminescent skin rippled with color as she spoke, an expression of respectful remembrance. "Her work on mycorrhizal adaptation for Martian soil is still fundamental to our ongoing projects." Gradually, Brock found his footing. The technical concepts began to click, his practical experience providing unexpected advantages when theory met application. He discovered that his jury-rigging approach to repairs, developed during resource-scarce colonial life, offered innovative solutions that sometimes surprised his instructors. Humans possess remarkable improvisational capabilities, Janarara observed after Brock successfully reconfigured a malfunctioning atmospheric processor using components from 3 different systems. "You see connections between disparate elements that our more specialized technical approaches sometimes miss." 4 months into their training, a familiar face appeared in the facility's diplomatic section. Hrix, the alien Brock had assisted on Mars, now properly introduced as Scout Observer Crix, sought him out during a rare free period. "Your progress is noted with approval," Crix stated. The translator now integrated into his exoskeleton, producing more natural speech. "The Council's assessment of your potential appears validated." "Thanks, I think," Brock replied, still finding Council communication styles somewhat formal. "How's the ship running?" "Optimal functionality restored. Your repair solution proved more durable than anticipated." Crix hesitated, then added, "I requested assignment to your eventual duty station. Familiarity may enhance operational efficiency." Brock grinned. "You mean you want to work with someone who already knows how to fix your stuff?" Crix's eyes performed the now familiar blinking sequence of amusement. Pragmatic considerations are logical. As their 6-month training period neared its conclusion, Brock and Lucas, along with other program participants, were summoned to the facility's central auditorium. Ambassador Zenthral, flanked by representatives from various council species and human diplomatic staff, addressed the assembled group. "You stand at the vanguard of a historic collaboration." Zenthral's translated voice resonated through the chamber. "The Interspecies Technical Corps represents our shared commitment to practical cooperation across biological, cultural, and technological boundaries." Brock listened with a mixture of pride and apprehension as Zenthral outlined their first assignment: maintenance and upgrades to the Confluence Central Station near Jupiter, a newly established waypoint for interstellar travelers entering the solar system. The work would serve as a proving ground for the Corps before expanding to more distant locations. "Dad, that's where the Flying Gardens are," Lucas whispered excitedly, having absorbed far more about Council facilities than Brock had realized. "Miri says they have actual Earth whales there, in a special water habitat." "Sounds like we'll be keeping busy," Brock whispered back, scanning the technical specifications displayed on the massive holographic projection. The station's systems were a complex integration of multiple technological approaches, exactly the kind of challenge the Corps had been created to address. After the briefing, Commander Whitaker sought him out, now wearing the formal uniform of Earth's newly established Interstellar Liaison Office. "Congratulations, Callahan. Your evaluation scores were among the highest in the human contingent." Whitaker extended a hand, which Brock shook with genuine appreciation for the man's ongoing support throughout the transition. "Still feels surreal," Brock admitted. 6 months ago, I was fixing climate units in a Martian prefab. Now I'm heading to an interstellar way station to work on systems I barely understood existed." "That's precisely why you were selected," Whitaker said. "Adaptability, practical ingenuity, and an ethical framework that translates across species boundaries. The Council values these qualities highly. And here I thought it was just because I didn't try to shoot an alien or steal its technology." Whitaker laughed. "Well, that certainly didn't hurt. But there's more to it. The Council has been observing humanity for decades. Callahan, they've seen our wars, our environmental struggles, our technological leaps and ethical stumbles. They needed evidence that we could transcend our more problematic tendencies. And fixing a broken ship was enough to convince them? Not just fixing it, how you fixed it, involving your son, explaining the process, refusing compensation. Small actions reveal character, and character matters to the Council more than technological advancement." Whitaker's expression grew serious. "This program is about more than technical cooperation. Brock, it's about proving that different species can work together toward common goals, despite vastly different evolutionary histories." The implication settled on Brock's shoulders like a weight. Responsibility beyond what he'd anticipated when accepting this position. He wasn't just representing himself, or even humanity. He was helping to shape the future of interspecies relations in ways that would long outlive him. 1 year after the day, 3 black cruisers appeared above his modest Martian home. Brock stood before the Galactic Council's Technological Development Committee. behind him, projected on a massive screen. Technical schematics detailed the innovative integration systems his team had developed for Confluent Station, solutions that combined the best aspects of multiple species approaches to environmental regulation, energy distribution, and navigation safety. The success of the Jupiter Confluence project demonstrates the fundamental principle upon which the technical core was founded. Brock concluded his presentation. That diverse perspectives, united by shared purpose, can achieve outcomes beyond the capabilities of any single approach. The committee members, 12 beings representing major council species, registered approval through their various physiological expressions. Ambassador Zenthral, now serving as committee chair, addressed the assembly. Engineer Callahan's team has exemplified the collaborative potential we envisioned. Their work has reduced system failures by 72%, increased energy efficiency by 38%, and most significantly, created a framework for ongoing integration of new technologies as member species join the Council. Applause came in various forms, some audible, others telepathic or expressed through light patterns, as Brock returned to his seat beside Lucas. Now 6 years old and proudly wearing the junior science program uniform he'd earned through his own impressive achievements. "You did great, Dad," Lucas whispered, his eyes shining with pride. Later, as they walked through the magnificent arboretum that formed the central axis of council headquarters, Lucas ran ahead to examine a flowering plant from a distant system, chattering excitedly with a young Axolorian about its properties. Brock watched his son with a fullness in his heart that had once seemed impossible after Maria's death. Commander Whitaker, recently promoted to Director of Earth's expanding interstellar program, joined him on the observation platform. "Quite a journey you've had," Whitaker remarked, nodding toward Lucas, who was now demonstrating to his alien friend how to make a proper paper airplane from a fallen leaf. "Never could have imagined it," Brock agreed. "Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear Mars dust hitting the windows." "Any regrets?" Brock considered the question, watching as Lucas's paper airplane soared through the carefully maintained atmosphere of the Arboretum, leaving his alien friends attempting to replicate the simple Earth technology with varying degrees of success. "I miss things about home sometimes. Earth's sky, real rain, but then I remember what home really means." He gestured toward Lucas. "He's thriving here, learning things Maria and I could never have dreamed of, making friends across the galaxy. And me? I'm doing work that matters, work that brings different worlds together." Whitaker nodded thoughtfully. "The Council is expanding the program. More humans will be joining soon. Engineers, scientists, cultural specialists. Your success has opened doors. They should focus on finding people who fix things because they need fixing," Brock said. "Not because of what they might get in return. That's what the Council really values, character over credentials." "I'll make a note of that in my recommendations," Whitaker said with a smile. "Though I doubt we'll find many candidates with your unique introduction to interstellar diplomacy." As they continued their walk, Brock reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them here. A random encounter on a dusty Martian road, a broken ship, a simple act of kindness offered without expectation of reward. Such small moments upon which the future turned. Lucas ran back to him, breathless with excitement. "Dad, Miri says there's a seedling from Mom's Martian project in the Earth section. Can we go see it?" "Absolutely, buddy," Brock replied, taking his son's hand. Together they walked toward the Earth Botanical Display, where a small piece of Maria's dream grew beneath an artificial sun, tended by beings from across the stars, a fitting memorial for the woman who had loved growth in all its forms. Home, Brock realized, wasn't Mars or Earth or even this magnificent interstellar facility. Home was where you built it, with the people, human or otherwise, who shared your values and vision. Maria would have understood that. Perhaps she had always known. As Lucas pressed his face against the environmental barrier, whispering to his mother's plant about all his adventures. Brock felt a sense of completion. They had found their place in a universe far larger and more wondrous than they had ever imagined, not through grand gestures or exceptional talents, but through the simple willingness to help a stranger in need. Some distances could only be measured in light years, others in the space between who you were and who you might become. Brock Callahan, once a struggling mechanic on a dusty Martian colony, now stood at the crossroads of galactic cooperation, all because he had stopped to fix a broken ship without asking for anything in return. The universe, it seemed, noticed such things.